As a young person myself, I too am living at home with my parents. So, we're going to find out why.
About
Why
one
are
in
we
three
doing that?
Americans between 18 and 34 years old live with their parents.
And while you may have heard more about this recently, this trend isn't new.
Between 2005 and 2015, the share just grew very steeply over this 10-year period. Since then, it's been fairly stable. There was an uptick, of course, during the pandemic. In the wake of the pandemic, those rates of parental co-residence are now about where they were right before. Part of the reason we see this escalation of young adults not leaving the nest or returning to the nest is this idea that it was harder and harder for them to weather shocks.
Nearly 30% of Gen Z said they would like to save, but don't make enough money. And roughly
True.
2 in 5 millennials and Gen Z adults feel it's harder to build financial wealth now than when their parents were their age because of the economy.
True.
27-year-old Victoria Franklin has been living with her mother in New Jersey since she graduated college in 2019.
I saw all of the money that I was saving, and I thought maybe I should stay home for a little bit, and I didn't feel an urgency to move out.
Not everyone is enthusiastic
Yep.
about this trend.
You guys are making six figures together. You can't tell me you can't afford a house. They just don't want to spend their money.
Told ya. 36% of Americans said in a
I'm sorry, but yeah, my family is the same way like that, and I hate when they do that kind of
2022 survey that more young adults living with their parents is bad.
Not how she was talking, but she's like, you guys are making six figures together. You guys can afford another house.
You can't tell me you can't afford a house.
Like,
They just don't want to spend their money.
Told ya. 36% of Americans said in a 2022 survey that more young adults living with their parents is bad for society. So here's why young
society has made it that way, dude.
Americans are choosing to live with their parents and what the implications are for the U.S. economy.
My name is Victoria Franklin. I am 27 years old, and I live in my childhood home with my mother and my boyfriend.
Victoria graduated from the
boyfriend's too
University of
much.
Miami in 2019 and moved in with her mom when she was looking for a job.
After
And
I
she
saw
drives
the
a
cost of
Benz?
living
What?
and things like that after I graduated, that maybe I'd be home for about a year.
I mean,
More than
she's working
half
to
of Gen
make it,
Z
then that's
adults
fair.
say they don't make enough money to live the life they want due to high cost of living.
I ended up bartending and waitressing until October, where I got my first offer, so it did take a little bit longer than I expected. Currently live at the Jersey Shore, and I was commuting into New York City, which takes about 2 hours each way.
Jeez.
And I thought, in 6 months or so, I'll move into the city, be closer to the job, and the pandemic threw a wrench in those plans.
Victoria now works a fully remote job, which she says she probably wouldn't have if it weren't for the pandemic. Without a commute to
So-
worry about, she was able to stay at her mom's for longer.
It's a lot harder for young people today to save up for, markers of the American dream than it was for previous generations.
I think as much as people make it out to be, and this is just my perspective of it, and for someone who doesn't go out as, like, ever, right? I don't go out, I don't go clubbing, I don't go drinking 24/7. I'm not an outsider, if you will. I'm doing my own thing, but there's no way they're gonna say, like, oh, they want to go party, they want to go be in the nightlife. There's no way they use that, right?
Part of the reason we see this escalation of young adults not leaving the nest or returning to the nest is this idea that it was harder and harder for them to weather shocks. And so, for example, if they suffered a layoff or they suffer some sort of health shock or they got in a car accident, if they didn't have any additional credit to weather that shock, they would end up moving back home. The
Anyway,
financial
yeah, correct.
stability of young adults, their ability to pay for things if they got into an emergency was one of the big factors influencing whether or not they were living on their own or living with their
True,
parents.
too. That's
A
also
significant
true.
number of Gen Z adults and millennials lack emergency savings. In fact, 46% of millennials and 32% of Gen Z have more credit card debt than emergency savings.
I use the credit card, but I didn't have enough money for the time being to pay my credit card bill, but I don't spend anything crazy in like the last year.
This can have ramifications for setting up a financial future.
Roughly 1 in 4 Gen Z adults say housing costs are one of the biggest challenges to financial success.
Yes.
The prices of homes has escalated over the last few decades much faster than actual incomes. So it is actually much harder for a
Have you
millennial
not
or
seen
a
the
Gen
prices?
Z
Oh my
to
gosh.
save up for a
Doesn't
down
matter where
payment to
you're
buy
at.
a home. And that's something that bears out in the data.
The pandemic did have a lot to do with it. I saw how much I was saving, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be paying, upwards of $3,000 a month and making somebody else richer when I could stay at home, save that money,
Sorry.
and spend it on where I.
That is exactly where it is. Why would you want to spend 3,000 plus on rent, making someone else richer, when you know that $3,000 might even go into a mortgage at some point? And right now you're saving it just by being at home. There's no way they're gonna get on our case for this.
I want to spend it. Between my job and my bartending and waitressing, I make anywhere from $85,000 to $95,000 a year.
That's decent,
I
but
would
it's
say
not
about
enough for
40
us,
to
right?
50% of my salary is going right into savings. My mentality is, why rent and give my money to someone else when I can start to own? And so a big chunk of that money is going to go towards a down payment on a house.
Young adults ages 25 to 34 in high cost of living areas are more
High cost of living, so plus 20% is like that darker color. So California, New Mexico. What is that? I think that's Alabama. Florida's there. Wow. Maine, Connecticut, DC. But Colorado's less than 12%, which is where I'm at. So like these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Iowa, Kansas City. Sorry, Massachusetts, Wyoming. What? I don't believe it. I don't believe that we are in the less than 12%.
likely to live with their parents. Nearly 26% of young adults in New Jersey were living with at least one of their parents in 2022. The median household income in Oceanport, New Jersey, where the Franklins live, was nearly $133,000 in 2022, while the median value of a home in the region
Jesus
was around
Christ.
$644,000.
My dad built this house for $350,000
Wow.
and was making probably $10,000 to $15,000 less than I was. My mom wasn't
Wow.
working at the time, and they were able to afford a $350,000 house on a $70,000
Yeah, that's
a year
crazy.
salary with a son. And that is just, that's not even the American dream anymore. That's not even possible.
Mm-hmm.
My aunt, who I fight with all the time, is always saying how you have to give somewhere, right? And my cousin said something to her the other day and said, we're giving everywhere. We don't get property. We don't get good school systems. Whatever
True.
we're trading off is too much to trade off.
I agree to this.
Victoria had brought up some conflict with her aunt a few times.
Oh, this
Oh,
is
here
my
we
Aunt
go.
Judy.
So I asked Aunt Judy to come on over and talk to us.
I talked about how much we fight about millennials, yes, but millennials living at home, and how you always say, well, you have to sacrifice something, but how much we're sacrificing. We don't get.
Put it this way, right? Their house is probably paid off too, most likely. Her dad built this house, so which means that, like, the cost of it done, but they're still paying the property tax, HOA fees, things like that. So that adds up. If it's not per month, every quarter, if not every quarter, then it's a yearly thing, but it still adds up.
Get like a big property, or we don't get like a nice house, or it's not in a good school system.
You have to start somewhere. You have to
Oh, here we
start
go.
anywhere. Just start your portfolio is what I told you. I don't care what it is.
How do you
don't have to
start
live in
it where-
Oceanport your first time.
No, but you were able to live in Oceanport the first time.
Okay, I guess it was different times.
Gen X
Exactly.
and baby boomers may have a tougher time understanding what young adults are going through today because they enjoyed, until the pandemic recession hit, a solid
I'll be honest, I was not working anywhere during the time of the pandemic, so I have not an excuse, not reason, but I'm not coming up with an excuse, but I'm just saying.
almost 15 years of
can't relate,
uninterrupted
but I can.
economic expansion. Baby boomers, Gen X, they weathered many economic downturns, including major recessions. But I think the big difference is that when they were starting to form their own households and starting to accumulate wealth, housing and higher ed were both more affordable relative to their incomes than they are now.
When I started out, I was making $35,000 a year. That was nothing. And he was making $35,000 a year. You guys are making six figures together. You can't tell me you can't afford a house.
I'm pausing way too much in this video, and I apologize for it, but there's so many things I have to comment on. When someone says you're making six figures, right? In my head, I think when they say six figures, they're thinking over $200,000-$300,000, right? When some people say six figures and I see where they're coming from, they're thinking, oh, over $500,000. Then there are certain people who say six figures and I see where they're coming from or see where they're at, and they're going, and I think when they say six figures, under 100,000 or like near 100,000, right? So there's just something wrong with the mentality side in
They just
all
don't
of
want to
this.
spend their money.
Told ya.
Sorry.
No, I don't know.
Did you want it? What was my first house? 250 maybe? 270?
Yeah, see, times are
That doesn't
different.
exist anymore.
Uh-huh.
Where am I finding a $270,000
I'm
house?
not making $35,000 a year. Combined, we made 70.
In 1995, $70,000 was the equivalent of $145,000 today.
Damn.
Oh.
Oh.
Look at that, see?
I think that's the other thing, right? Is like if you're making under 70,000 yearly, and you're living at home, obviously you're saving. If you're not paying anything, except maybe your insurance, health insurance, if your work isn't already, so let's just say your car insurance, then you're in a good spot to save, but you're never going to be able to get to or be able to go where you want to in the future. You're always going to be saving and never going to be able to afford, right? If you're making over, like she said, 140,000, so basically let's say 200,000, I think you'll be financially in a better spot to afford. You have an easier time on the down payment, and then after that it's a whole lot better. You get a refinance your home. So, but
We do also
there are
have a
logistics to
situation
it.
that what is really good for an individual person or an individual family is not necessarily good for the entire macroeconomy.
The Federal Reserve estimates in a 2019 paper that young adults who move out of their parents' house would spend around $13,000 more per year on things such as housing, food, and transportation.
One of the
I
big
can
boosts to
survive off of
consumer
the
spending
bare
is
minimum.
when people form households. Whether you're a renter or a buyer, you need to furnish that house. You need to
True.
fix things up in the home to make it livable. You end up spending a lot of money during that time.
True.
So if the pace of household formation slows down, then that's going to slow down the pace of consumer spending, and that will produce a drag on the economy.
Another issue is that there aren't enough affordable properties in
Yes.
popular areas for younger people who are in entry-level jobs and making less money.
Any sort of housing policy needs to be multi-pronged. Are there homes that are at the price point of these prospective home buyers? What can we do to increase the housing supply? What can we do to build? What can we do to help elder Americans, to help?
They're building enough. What they're not doing is bringing the cost down, right? You're like in the area I'm in, right, or even like the next city over. If you want a 3-bed, 3-bath, they're going to charge you $700,000. Why would I want a 3-bed, 3-bath for $700,000 when I can even I can go and try to get the 5-bed, 6-bath for 1.2 or 1.5?
Help them
But I'm
downsize
so
and
much
move
better
into
off for
more
so much square
right-sized
footage.
homes that will
They're not
open
even
up
offering
larger
that
homes
much
for young
700,000
families. So
anymore.
I think one alone is not really going to do it. We've got to look both at demand as well as supply.
The other major factor here is how much student loan debt young
I have my
Americans
opinions.
have.
Let's just put it this way.
59% of U.S. adults say they've delayed financial milestones because of their student debt.
I do have a student loan payment. It's about $480 a month. So that's my largest expense.
The liability could be worse for Black borrowers, who tend to have higher than average student loan debt and less wealth than white counterparts. Black and Hispanic respondents were more likely to say that debt was holding them back from reaching financial milestones. Less than half of white respondents said the same.
The amount of debt young adults held also rose substantially between 2005 and
That's
2014,
insane.
during that period of strong escalation in that cohort living with their parents.
Aggregate student loans are such an enormous part of the economy now, and that's not a reflection of younger people
No,
making
it's a reflection
bad
of our
choices with their
economy itself.
education. It's really a consequence in large part due to the fact that there's less public funding, and
True.
going to college just is more expensive, which makes it even harder for even those college grads who are hoping to earning more money as a result of their college degrees.
Which they
Student
won't
loan debt by
initially.
itself can't explain the phenomenon, especially considering so many European countries with much less student loan debt have higher rates of young adults living with their parents.
24 out of 29 European countries.
Sorry, hold on. I want to see the stats. So, the total percentage here, starting in Croatia, is 76%, and the lowest is with Sweden at 17%. The highest rate of which in Croatia, women, 69%, and the lowest of men is Sweden at 19.1%. And the lowest of women is 15.3%. And the highest of men is 83%. But I think that's a government thing too, right? Like, just what they're taxing you on, because this is all from like European countries. But like the real crazy ones isn't even here. Oh, wait, never mind. The U.S. is there. So this is overall, like across the world. So the U.S. we're not too bad, but
had more 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents in 2021 than the U.S. It was over 70% in Italy, Portugal, Greece, Serbia, and Croatia.
My boyfriend is Brazilian, and multi-generational homes are very common in almost everywhere else
That's true.
in the world,
That's true. I forgot
except
about
in
that.
the United States. So I'm just taking a page of their playbook.
Nice.
The Americans are
Well
probably the
played.
only people that they're not multi-generations in one house. And I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think it's kind of nice. Why do we have to be so cold to push everybody out?
You know, there are a lot of cultures out there in which it is normal to live with your parents until you get married. And I don't think there's necessarily an economic explanation for that.
The Franklins would say in the US, it is the economy, but Victoria's mom is kind of okay with it.
Unfortunately, it is the economy and the world that we live in that just doesn't allow them to go live a comfortable life. So with them,
I like this girl's mom because my parents are the same, where I can be here as long as I'm making money to a point, and job hunting honestly is the hardest thing in the world. There's another video I did where there are ghost job listings that play a part into it if you don't have a job already, and like when they give you a position, they're looking for the most randomest things of all time. But she makes a point in this economy, you can't just kick your kid out. I mean, you can, right? You can't kick your kid out, but some parents are like, well, I see how things are going, that's fine. But this other lady, she says here,
to push everybody out.
You know, there are a lot of cultures out there in which it is normal to live with your parents until you get married. And I don't think
that is very true, because then at some point, as soon as they saved enough, because now it's a dual income, then they have enough to go and spend on a house, right?
there's necessarily an economic explanation for that.
The economic explanation for that is everything is just too high.
The Franklins would say in
Honestly.
the US, it is the economy, but Victoria's mom is kind of okay with it.
Unfortunately, it is the economy and the world that we live in that just doesn't allow them to go live a comfortable life. So
Yeah.
with them living here was no big deal. It's not really a problem. They're saving their money. Eventually they'll buy a house, and that works.
Yeah, I have my strong opinions about this, that a lot of this older generation just doesn't, they don't get it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Let's talk about this, because this is an issue, but I think it's on our government side, honestly. And I don't try to bring politics or government issues into it, but it's definitely on a government side where we're, as a generation, struggling.